Harry Birch, I thought I did. Born 1921, October 7th. Went in the Coast Guard in 1940, and I stayed in there for 21 and a half years. In the meantime, I moved from up the neck to Depot. That's up north end, but the east end. And then during that Coast Guard career, I was in charge of Assateague Station, the Lighthouse for a short while, Wallops Beach Station for a while. Then I changed my rate to telephone electrician and furnished them boys in them Outer Islands lifeboat stations with telephone service. When this wildlife outfit, bought Assateague from Nellie Fields, who inherited it from her father. That was most of the island from Fishing Point through up to Virginia line, Maryland line. And I think they surveyed it something like 10,000 acres. And she was talking to them surveyors on that hill there behind the lighthouse. And Bill Scott was the last resident over there. He come walking up with his white whiskers, gray whiskers, and you could see what he had for breakfast in there. Bacon crumbs and eggs, a little bit of eggs and stuff. Chewed tobacco. Barefooted. He walked up just as he heard her say, I want you people to do a good job, because I don't want to sell these people nothing that I don't own. I want you to be sure you measure every foot, get it right, because when I die, I won't go to heaven. He walked up just about that time. He spit and tobacco juice down between his toes. He said, Nellie Fields, if you get to heaven, you'll be the first damn Fields ever got there. I know them all. He's a tough old bird. He was for a while, and the last man to live there. Oh, they did. They just building lots, usually. And they used the whole island, which was owned by Sam Fields, or he bought it later. They used that to graze their sheep and cattle and horses. And when Sam Fields bought it, he stopped all that. They didn't have no place to graze their animals, so they had to leave. And most of them moved over on the east side of the island. Some of them moved their homes over. But Bill Scott and Mamie stayed right there till the very end. One day, Harv Beebe went over there, and one of them ducks, they just come out with them ducks, you know, they go into water, they go on the land. And he stopped by Scott's. He said, come on, I'll come to give you a ride. So they crawled up in there. He had to have a ladder to get in it with high wheels. And he started that duck rolling, and he headed right for the channel. And when he got to the edge of the water, Scott hollered, whoa, whoa. He kept right on going. Scott had never seen nothing like that. And his wife left and went up to Delaware, I think, with her daughter, left him there alone for a few years. And I had a crew out there from, most of them was from Hell's Kitchen, New York. And I didn't know it at the time, but they got their jollies when they went on liberty, stealing cars up there, getting the cops to chase them. But they took a liking to Scott. And they would steal food out of my closet at the lifeboat station, take it over to Scott. So one day Buckaroo called me up and he said, Harry, which one of them boys out there smokes cigars? I said, they don't have money to buy cigars. Well, he said, the reason I asked him, he said, they come over here Sunday to see Scott, which was usual. And he said, got your command car stuck. And they went and used my command car to pull her out. He said, I wondered if one key fitted all. I said, don't think so. But if it's the boys I think it was, they don't need a key. They'll take your phone car if you got one. Well, he said, I just wondered about that. I said, no, I don't think you got the right man. So I called up Norman Jones. He smoked cigars at that time. I said, Norman, somebody robbed Buckaroo's duck trap and left a handful of cigars in there. And unless I see a pair of black ducks on my doorstep when I get home, I'm going to tell Buckaroo who smoked cigars over here. My God, man, he said, don't do that. It was the old pal cigar had been over there and left a pocket full in the duck trap. I knew about who it was when he told me about them cigars. Old cigar. Well, tell us about the station. You stayed through Randwall. Tell us about some. I went there first, and I had a crash boat along with that station, a 53-foot crash boat. Used to hold drills about picking up pilots offshore from the Navy base. But I was only there about 6 months. And they transferred me down to Wallace, put me in a station there that was closing, put it as caretaker status. I stayed there about 6 more months while I was waiting for them to transfer me to the telephone shop. It was during the changeover when the war was over and the Navy had dropped the Coast Guard and the Treasury hadn't picked them up yet. And sometime there we didn't even get paid for a while. Couldn't re-enlist, and they couldn't discharge you. Cal Tully said he never heard nothing like that. He said a lot of Saturdays went by and he couldn't pay his help, but he didn't think the government was like that. Well, I said, all the government ain't that way, but the Coast Guard is. At that time, they were poor folks. I've seen them transfer oil from one cutter to another so they could go on patrol. Didn't have enough money. It was the end of the year. They didn't have the money to buy new oil. When you were growing up on the island here, what were some of the things that you got into? Oh, my dear. You can't imagine. Some of it I can't tell in mixed company, Gene. You put me on the spot here. Yeah, we got it. Entertainment, went to movies. I used to cook breakfast for an old man, Lambert, Donald's grandfather. His daughter would leave him every winter and go up stay with her son in Philadelphia for about 3 months. And the girls would pay me and Britches Cullen. Mildred Powell was one of his daughters. She'd give us 3 movie tickets. That was worth 45 cents. And Nels Lewis was the grandson, and he'd give us 50 cents. And Miss Olive, Donald's mother, would come up because she'd done her part by cooking lunch and dinner. But me and Britches would cook his breakfast. I went over there one morning, I was running late. And I said, what do you want for your breakfast? He knew I was late, and he was impatient. And he was beating on the sugar dish with his spoon. So I boys, I want hot cakes. And I said, you'll have them. At a wood stove. So I threw the lighter knot in there, got her going woof, woof, and I was looking for hot cake flour. Never had none. Well, I'd seen my mother make hot cakes out of regular flour, but she had yeast powders too. Weren't no yeast powders either. So I mixed that flour up with a little bit of water. Had me a big frying pan on that wood stove, but she was a huffy. Poured a big old hot cake in that frying pan. When it got brown on one side, I flipped her over. He was still beating on that sugar dish, getting on my nerves. When I got that one done, I got his plate and I give it to him. I said, work on that one a while, I'll build you another one. When I turned around with the next one, he was going like this here. I said, what's the trouble? So boy, you don't cook like Liv. I said, I never claimed to. He said, so boy, it sticks in my throat. I bet that was a sticky mess. Can you imagine eating sugar on hot cakes? Nothing drier in this world. Well, I worked on the water and I tried all of it. Tonguing clams, tonguing oysters, wading clams, raking clams. I tried all of it. And every Monday morning I'd start out just as broke as the Monday before. And I'd see the Coast Guard boys riding up and down once in a while on Liberty. They were all dressed up in their white uniforms. And I said, that's for me. And that led me into Coast Guard. I was a little while before I got into that life-saving end of it. I was on cutters for a couple of years. But after a while, I got to transfer me over and make me a surfman in the lifeboat station. That was a whole lot better life than them weather cutters. Because we'd sit out there all for a month and not see nothing. Maybe the Dixie Clipper when she flew over. That's what we were there for, to furnish them weather so they could know at that time what kind of weather they were going to run into flying from New York to England or wherever they were going. But that was a bad life. I'd rather been in jail had been for the stigma attached to it. Because sometimes I didn't even sit at the table. It was so rough out there. I was glad to get into lifeboat station, to tell you the truth. No, single. I didn't have a family until I come back from Guadalcanal. When I got back from Guadalcanal, I met my true love, started a family. That's when I went to Assateague and Wallace. Changed my rate to telephone man because I could get off every night, and I was home all the time. Except when I had to go on temporary duty or transferred to Honolulu, places like that, Boston. Not a good life for a family. Coast Guard ain't, or never was. He went with me for a short while, but my wife didn't like it. She didn't like Honolulu. She didn't like Boston. So she stayed a little while, but she came back. She wanted the youngest to go to school here. That was her main idea for coming back. I don't know. I guess she thought, and they had excellent schools in Honolulu, some of the best. I guess they had good schools up in Boston, Massachusetts, but she rather want to go to with the kids that they knew, I guess. Hey, I went up Pope's Island Clubhouse, and we thought at that time that all the clams in the world was just the other side of that Maryland line. Weren't no thicker over there than they were on this side. Taking care of the lighthouse. When I took care of it, they had, I called them batteries. They called them Edison cells. They'd been there 13 years. And I'd have to go over and put water in them once a week and charge them. Had a generator there to charge the battery, keep the light burning. A few years later, they made it automatic, put cable over there with electricity from the island. But the batteries done well to last 13 years, I thought. It was on 24 hours a day in those days. And then when they automated it, I think it just came on at sunset or between sunset and dark. When it got dark, I think they had a photo cell in there. Dennis Peterson was the first of my knowledge man to run that lighthouse, and he had all the beacons to take care of too in this section up to the Maryland line. Then Norman Jones had it for a few years. It was always battery operated. Well, I might be wrong. It might have been oil operated at one time. Yeah, probably did. Way back there, before my day. Well, my father shucked oysters in the wintertime, painted houses in the summertime. And sometimes he worked on the water when he didn't have the houses to paint. They were hard times back in the 30s. She just stayed home, took care of the children. That's a full-time job for a woman. Taking care of the children, especially if they got 5. I had 4 sisters. Norman Jones had more than that, I think. Old man John Sterling thought it was remarkable he hadn't come out to be a sissy. All them girls was older than him. He was a baby. I did work some with him, but he always relegated me to paint the fences and the garages and outbuildings, where the spiders was mostly, and I was definitely afraid of spiders. I didn't like that. And I'd rebel on him. I wanted to go climbing. Because I'd get through climbing by 11 o'clock, I was all through for the day. When you paint a house, you stayed there till 5 o'clock. Some of them days was hot days. Oh, that was the best part of it. They helped each other. And the taxes weren't so high in those days. I don't think anybody over there paid income tax at all. In fact, some of them on here don't pay today. But that's another story. But they were a big help to each other, and they lived off the land. They painted, that fellow was painting it in the bosun's chair. The man up on that catwalk went around it. He was tending the line. The man was hanging down from a rope. And he'd paint her on each side as far as he could get. And then he'd holler up for the man to lower him down a little more, and he'd paint some more. Time went by, and the man hadn't hollered in quite some time, so he looked over to see where the man was. He was gone. He'd fell out of that bosun chair. He must have been close to the ground because he never got hurt. When I say living off the land, they lived primarily out of Tom's Cove. Clams and oysters, there's plenty of them them days. And of course, they raised hogs, sheep, and cattle, so they didn't want for meat. In fact, the only thing they had to buy was flour. And they come over to Postown, they'd buy a barrel at a time. Them two old women up Depot was walking home one day. The old man John Martin, had ordered his flour by the barrel, and the truck had set it out the side of the road. And they looked in that barrel, opened the bung. They said, "There's flour in here." Old woman Burch and old woman Munger, both of them hard hearing. And they said, "Flour, we can use that." Put the bung back in the barrel, and they rolled the barrel home and give flour to everybody in the neighborhood before John Martin found out where his flour went. Hey, Barbara, they went downtown one day and they run across some grapefruit they'd never seen before. They said they're the biggest oranges I ever seen. So they bought a couple, headed home, got up for his tabernacle, they sat down and tried one of them. When they started eating that grapefruit, one of them said, "Ma, the sourest orange I think I've ever tasted." Then they got talking about how small they were when they were born. One of them said, "When I was born," she said, "made my bed in a cigar box." Cigar box? She'd put me in a coffee pot. The other one said, "Coffee pot?" Said, "Did you live?" Said it did, done well. They were comical old women. Communities, oh well. They were a lot more helpful in them days than they are now, but like I said before, they didn't have all these taxes we have to pay now. That kind of keeps people apart, I think. And television, they didn't have television. So they made up their own television. Most of the old timers did. They had a store downtown called Charlie Henderson's Peanut Gallery. And he used to sit in there and they'd make up some weird stories, great stories. Had a man down there named Frank Booth, and he had a smart dog. It was a Chesapeake Retriever. And he'd put a little basket around his neck and a note with some money in it. It's in the dog's store. He could go down to the Penner store and pick up what Frank wanted and take it back in that basket. He wouldn't chase a cat. He wouldn't fight another dog. Straight home. So they were sitting around talking one night, and they said, talking about smart dogs people had. Somebody said, "Frank, you had a smart dog." Oh, he said he was smart. I didn't know just how smart he was. He said, I decided to test him one day. Somebody told me he was a retriever. Started taking down a steamboat dock, tossed a 50-cent piece out of the channel. Said, go get it, sport. Said he dashed out there and he went under. Bubbles come up. He stayed and stayed. The bomb boy poked his head up. Said, did you get it, sport? Said he shook his head no, and under he went again. He said, I stayed down and waited, thought I'd lost my dog. He said, in fact, I started to go home. About that time he popped up. They said, did he have it, Frank? Nope. But he had a codfish and 15-cent change. That's what they were selling for in them days. They'd make up stories like that. Hmm? That's what they did for entertainment. Sit around and make up yarns. One woman thought her husband was running out on her. They had what they called a big store down there at that time. And they had what they call the NRA, and they kept a dingy blue light in the store at night. So this woman decided she'd catch her husband. She followed him. And he went in the door, the big store, the front door. And she didn't know it, but it had a back door. He went right on through. So she went in looking for him, and she couldn't see him. It was so dingy in there. So she had to make it look like she'd come after something else. So she went over to the goods counter. They had big bolts of goods. They made their own dresses in them days. So the man come around there, and she said, I was looking for some goods to make a dress. He said, all right, lady. Got a big bolt of goods down. It would weigh 100 pounds. Them big bolts of goods was heavy. Rolled it out there for her, and she looked at it. But meantime, she was looking around to see where her husband went. Couldn't find him. So he, to make a long story short, he got down every bolt of goods he had on the shelf but one. And he said, lady, are you sure you're looking for goods to make a dress? Well, she said, tell you the truth. I was looking for my husband. Well, he said, honey, I've only got one bolt left. But if you think it's in there, I'll get it down. I'll get it down for you. He was getting disgusted. Oh, well, Sundays was standard dinner on a Sunday was chicken pot pie and turnip greens. Just about all over the island, I think. And we had an old man used to come around selling turnip greens. They called him Turnip Green Bill. He was a colored fellow from over around Wattsville. But they were close-knit families in them days.
Would you holiday anything that you had big gatherings?
No, I don't recall any big gatherings.
Everybody
Yeah, but summertime we'd go on a church picnic. They'd usually take Ralph Laws was in the church, and he'd donate one of them big barges they used to ferry stuff back and forth to Franklin City. And he'd take the whole Sunday school, the whole church crew, either the Assateague or Wallace, to a picnic. They were the big days. Didn't have money enough to go very far. Didn't do a whole lot of traveling. And like I told you about that cart in that museum over there a while ago, old man Park Jester had that, him and his wife both had a garden, and they'd raise produce. And they raised watermelons, cantaloupes, all kinds of vegetables. But he put her produce in one corner of that wagon, and his in another corner, and take it downtown and sell it. But he took her money home to her, what she'd raised. And he raised a few milk cows. And the only time we got milk when I was growing up was when one of us was sick. Had to be sick to get milk. And we had to go down to his house to get it. And he'd always skim the cream off the top, make butter. So the milk we got was sort of a bluish color. And in the spring of the year, it tasted a lot like wild onions. I guess them cows was eating a lot of wild onions. Well, old man Tom Reed always maintained it. That's what made babies mean later on, was when they started feeding them on canned milk, cow's milk. He said nothing meaner than a cow. and the young ones took after them. As long as they were breastfed, they were better children, he said. I don't think they were, but he said that. Well, later on, they started feeding some of them. Some of them didn't have breast milk, and they had to do something, and they had come up with something called condensed milk. Uh, I forget the name of that milk, but it had a lot of sugar in it too. But it was prepared especially for babies. I can't remember the name of it, but it was special milk for babies. And then it come out later on, the doctors would prescribe a formula for babies. Well, they'd keep them 2 or 3 days for the funeral director was going to pick them up. But the saddest part was them boys on Assateague when they had that typhoid epidemic, and the other one that we used to get vaccinated for. I can't remember names now. Smallpox. The Merritt boys had to bury their mother. That was the sad thing, and one of them caught it. I forget his name. It was Grover Merritt's brother. I can't remember his name, but he caught smallpox. He was G. Merritt's father, Jim Henry. Did you know him? They had to wrap her in a sheet, and they had a special burying ground for them people with smallpox over there. The real burying ground is that's as you cross the bridge up over to your left, up on that hill. And the tourists have stolen all the grave markers. They had mostly wooden markers, cypress usually, or cedar. They took all of them. I think the only one left last time I was there was a marble monument to Ralph Watson's grandfather, a fellow named Watson. And he was a member of the Loyal Eastern Volunteers. And I said to Norman that day, I said, he was his grandfather also. Norman, I said, what the Loyal Eastern Volunteers do? He said, I don't know. I said, I think they went over the mainland and stole them people's chickens. He's probably right. He was probably right. No, that was before my day. That was when my dad was a little fella. But them little boys had to go bury their mother, and they wouldn't, the undertaker wouldn't take them. They had a special burying ground for people with that smallpox. That's over there near where the uh, center is, information center is now, not the new one they're building, but the other one. They buried them in a separate burying ground. Well, the whole process was the undertaker would pick them up and take them to the graveyard, and or to the church for have a funeral, and then to the grave. That's like it is today. Only they had a lot of times they stayed in the house till it's time to bury them. Yeah, oh yeah, they brought a lot of food over, and enough to feed the multitude. They don't do that much anymore, do they? I think they do take pies and cakes and stuff. Amron always sent baked ham when somebody died, one of his patients especially. I don't know if he still does. He'd say, don't bother. She's feisty. I don't know much about that. I've heard some stories on it. Yeah, he got me involved in that land he bought on Smith Island. Sent a lawyer up to see me about a road down there. And I told him, Hartnett, his name was, the road was there far back as I could remember, and people used it, but they wanted to cut him out. He had just a lot, and the Conservancy had bought the rest of the island, about like Sam Fields did over here. But I think he convinced them that the road went to the public. They couldn't close it.
back from the storm and stuff and weather and
Man, they were terrible. They were terrible. The 33 storm, my grandfather was laying in the front room in a bed, and he couldn't get out of bed, he was bedridden just before he died. I guess I was about 6 years old, and I was wading up and down the room, towing my boat in the house, water about 14 inches high. I was a whistling. By God, boy, he said, can't you do nothing but whistle? I didn't know it at that time, but that was an old sailor saying, whistle up the wind. He thought I was whistling up storms, I guess. That was not a hurricane. That was two low pressures merged together. But it hung in here for 3 days. Tide kept rising, never did fall. Come almost in my house. In fact, I put my floor furnace out. We had to go down the road. Look, it was cold. Went down the road. We were going to my wife's uncle, but Josh Reed stopped us and took us into his house. He had a heater set on top of the floor. The tide never come in his house, so he was still warm in there. And he had gas he could cook with, so we made that fine. And then my family, after it subsided a little bit, went to Virginia Beach to stay with Diane. She was down there with Donna Ray in the Coast Guard. They stayed down there for, I guess, a week while we got the dead horses out of the woods. That was an ordeal too. Because the way they were, I didn't know how they were going to get them off. And the doctors were saying if they stayed there, it would create an epidemic, typhoid or something. And I suggested to the councilman down there to get a helicopter in there. He could lift them off that way. Well, the first one to lift it off, they had a rope around its neck, dangling underneath that helicopter. Damn, when them tourists didn't see that and called a congressman or somebody, stopped it just like that. Took them hours to get back to removing them horses with that helicopter. The horses was already dead, but the woman didn't pay no attention to that. She didn't like the way they were dragging them out of the woods. I didn't know any other way to get them out. Couldn't get a vehicle back in there. Oh, I'm going to say conservatively 50. Died mostly from the cold. The water was cold, and they couldn't find high ground to get it away from them. So they might have got pneumonia. I don't know, but I think they died from exposure mostly. It was at least 50 died, maybe more. 62.
So what did you say is some of the local knowledge that's what the particular to the area?
Well, you just left a man who has all that. Big R. I say you just left that man. He knows all that, don't he? Yes, sir. It's the where the wind was. See, the tide rises, it's coming down the beach. But when the wind blows northeast, that helps it out. It's a big help to it. So it keeps on rising. When the wind is southwest or southern, that helps the low tide. It pushes it up the ocean, and the tides go out. The moon has a lot to do with that too. I don't know just how the moon was in that 62 storm, but probably wasn't the right, as Jim Jester would say, right pogey. He could never pronounce apogee or perigee. He called it pogey. You remember old man Jim? He come by Bruce and Herbert one day. They had their nets out toward marshes, and he read the almanac all the time. Jim did, and he said, "Boys, get your rig in and let yourself go for home. Moon's in pogey, and it's going to blow hell up." Well, Bruce said to Herb, what do you think of that? Herb said, don't pay no attention to that old man. He's full of that foxglove wine he's got up there in that water bucket. And you ain't paying attention to him. And Bruce said about 30 minutes later, the wind broke down. He never seen such a gale of wind in his life. They'd like done well to get their nets back in. He said, I'll pay attention to him next time he tells me. Moons and pogies. The moon, well, that has to do with the rise and fall of the tide. I guess it's gravity. The moon exerts gravity a certain amount on the earth. Do you ever feel different when the moon's close? Yeah, it has a tendency because your body's 90% water. You might feel it. Some people do. Some people don't. Yeah, every now and then. Every now and then. Yeah. I know a lot of stuff I could tell you about. Like I said, I can't do that in mixed company. I can't top cigar. Newman will tell you that. You can let him tell his story first. You still can't top him. Oh, I met some very nice people while I was taking care of that hunting lodge. Very nice people. We had one come down there, and a fellow that owned the lodge said his buddy was coming down. He said he's going to foul up. I don't know how, but he's going to mess up. I said, why do you say that? Well, he said, I've never seen it yet. And he told me he'd got a 4-wheel drive vehicle and he's going to drive the beach himself this time. I wouldn't have to go get him. So I'm sure he's going to foul up. So we sat and waited for him till 10 o'clock. He said, I told you, there's no telling where he is. I said, you think we ought to go look for him? No. Oh. Said there wasn't nowhere to look. So we went to bed. About 2 hours later, the phone rang. Fellow Clement down near the Virginia line had a clubhouse out on the surf bank. And he was on the line. He said, you people lost a man up there? I said, yeah, we're missing one. He said, they got 2 of them down here. They had walked 5 miles. First off, they had turned back a side road. The hunting lodge was down a side road, but they turned one too soon. And they went down where the deer hunters had been with their 4-wheel drives, and they'd wallered out holes in that road that you could bury a horse in. They got their 4-wheel drive in there, and they got her stuck. When you stick a 4-wheel drive, she's a stuck vehicle. You're right on the chassis. Then they got out and went to walking. And they walked right past the road they should have took, which was the next road to the right. They walked 5 miles. That's how he messed up. That's how he knew he was going to mess up. And he was a famous lawyer. So we started down to pick him up. Had a heavy rain that night. And when we started, we see their tracks where they walk around in water holes in that road going down the beach. And about a mile or so before we got to Clement's house, they quit walking around the water hole and they're walking straight on to them. I thought, that's odd. Why they walked around all them water holes and all of a sudden they walked right on to them. So I asked him when they finally forgot them in the car. The reason for that was they had a flashlight to start with. And when the batteries got weak, they had to walk right through the water holes. But when we got to them, they sounded like a tree full of owls. Clement had plied them with strong drink. They were feeling no pain. He hawing and the garrulous bunch I ever seen. So we stopped by at an outdoor speaker. We stopped by and washed the mud off. And he come out and he said, that old woman over there, 90-some years old, Pound for pound, he said she's the toughest woman ever raised on this tump. He should have had her every doctor from Salisbury to Cape Charles. Couldn't find anything wrong with her. He said, and that Les Tingle come up here in that old car he's got. One Sunday, took her for a ride. Been a changed woman. Healed every ailment she had. That's all she wanted was a car ride. He went down to Conant and bought a grass cutter, one of the self-propelled. Roland Hitches sold it to him. Told him how to get it going. Said you lift the handle up, and she goes, pulls herself right along. He didn't tell him how to cut it off. So he went home to cut his grass. He couldn't stop her, so he went over and cut the neighbor's grass. His wife come out and hollers, said, your supper's ready. So he run her up that big old pine tree in the front yard. He said, grind on that a while, you son of a bitch. Then he went in and eat his supper. Oh, the first union was called the Oyster Openers Association. My father used to play a fiddle. They had their own orchestra in that union meeting. I used to go when I was a little boy just to hear the music. And they wanted a nickel raise. They were getting a 25 cents a gallon for shucking oyster, and they wanted a nickel raise and couldn't get it. So they went on a strike. And I don't think Chincoteaguers knew much about union or striking or nothing else. But they went on a strike, so they imported some people from the mainland. That's what brought this story about. And they come on here to shuck oysters, but the old shuckers was on a strike, took their shotguns and chased them back across that bridge. And that was the end of that. And they never did get the nickel raise. And the Taylor boys was a treasure. I think they benefited more than anybody from it. They planted a lot of oysters in the bay. I think they benefited more than anybody. Oh, yeah. They work differently. They're farmers. These people over here are watermen, most of them. And it's a different lifestyle. Huh? Oh, yeah, they get along. Can't do no other. They bring their stuff over here, a few of them used to, in trucks and huckster it out, or produce. But I don't think anybody ever huckstered any seafood over there, do you? I don't know of any. Selling their produce by the truck, out of the truck. Instead of going to the store, you buy it right off the truck. Fresh produce. But then they got all these produce stands like Doll Baby had. With dew still on the produce. Doll Baby, he's dead and gone. Leave his character. They were down there tariffing him and his brother-in-law, Bob Melvin. He's living, he's gone too, isn't he? He's the one done on board in that truck, wasn't he? How about that? They were catching terrapins at Parker's Creek. You know, you set the net across the creek and pick the terrapins out, and you move the net down the creek further and go beat on the boat and chase the terrapins out a little farther. They come along, Pothead only had a finger pier running out in that creek. And there was bags and bags underneath that finger pier because he'd clam all week and bag them, put them under the pier to keep them in the water. Then Friday he'd take them Parksley and huckster them out to them people in Parksley. And all he wanted usually was a dry cell battery for his radio and a little flour and lard to take home for his wife to cook. But he lived off the land too. So anyway, they seen these bags under that pier. Doll Baby said, Bob, he said, wonder what's in them bags. Don't know. He said, set me ashore and I'll find out. So he went and looked under that dock, picked that bag of clams. He said, Doll Baby, his clams in these bags. Doll Baby said, well, he must have wanted us to have them or he wouldn't have left them there. Cleaned him out root and branch. You talk about a man. He was a mad man. Yeah, almost all of them. Oh yeah, yeah. Hip shot because he was limping. His brother was named Hugh. My father nicknamed him because he come around one morning when he was a little boy and said, "How do you like my new shoes?" And my father named him Chew, and he went by that the rest of his life. Doll Baby was a doll baby. That's where he got that nickname, because he was a doll baby. Pothead only. Pothead only. Yeah, he had a boat with a pothead engine in it, single cylinder engine. They named him Pothead only. But he claimed all that shore was his. And these boys were going down to Bay clamming. We'd go in there clamming because it's good clamming. And he'd shoot them. He shot Johnny Lewis and Hill Clark one day. Johnny was laying down in the boat. He didn't get much of the shot, but he stuck shot in Hill. Hill had on his long handle drawers, you know. That's all they clammed in. And when he got back to the boat, blood running down his legs. From then on, every time he went down to the bay, he wouldn't even look that way. He'd say, "He only like got me." He'd point like that. He only like to got me. Howard Merritt said the first time down the bay, my grandfather was with him, and he was sleeping under the stern of the boat. My grandfather had a bad hernia, big as a basketball. And going down through Cat Creek, they were talking about how when they got down there, they were going to work Pokeling's ground. Pokeling and a lot of other was down there would take up from the county, say 1 acre of ground to plant oysters on, but they would stake up 100 acres and pay just 1 acre taxes. Pokeling had done that, but he took in all of Matomkin Bay. So and he'd shoot them if he caught anybody working on it. So they were talking about when they got down there, they were going to work Pokeling's ground. He said, and about that time, my grandfather come out from under his stern, and he had big winds on his head, big as golf ball. And he had a leak in his cellar. He said he had a bar box feather stuck in one of them winds and wrote on it red feather stuck in the other. Toughest looking man he'd ever seen. He said, Uncle Warren, what are you going to do when you get down to the bay? He said, by God, boy, what time I ain't a fighting, I'm going to be working Pokeling's ground. Got down there, they couldn't hire him to go on Pokeling's ground. He wouldn't lay a foot on it. But he could talk a big deal. Winds, they call them winds, big lumps, big bumps on his head. Don't see them anymore. I wonder where they come from. Oh, actually, they pushed the skin out. Big as golf balls up there. He had 4 or 5 on his head. No, he's the only one I knew had them. No, he's gone. He left right after that 33 storm.